I know you're as shocked as I am to see me standing here at this time, but I'm going to do my best. um, this was really my brother Joe's responsibility, but over the last couple of days, for the safety of my dad and of us and of all of you, he found it necessary to quarantine himself a little bit. He is here with us this morning and is watching the service at a distance. So we love you, Joe. We know you're here with us. 62 years ago, God granted my mother the desire of her heart to marry a pastor. My dad had just graduated from the Bible seminary and was about to take over a small church in the town of Freer, Texas. They had no idea what their life would become or how God would use them or where they would end up. But she married someone who would, in time, become the man of God that we know today. And I truly believe that she knew that somehow, and she was excited to be a part of all of it. My father often talks about when they began to show interest in each other, how it was her that pursued him. Dad apparently played hard to get, but if you know my mom, where there's a will, there's a way. We are proud of the legacy my dad has forged from very humble beginnings to where we sit today. There would be no legacy of Puerto La Hermosa without a Joe Carizales. But there would be no Joe Carizales without Alicia Carizales. My parents were two halves of a circle. When you thought of one, you automatically thought of the other one. Dad definitely had the calling of God in his life, but so did my mom. As a couple, they complemented each other. My father as a leader, my mother as the arms and legs of the operation. In my mother's world, you were either helpful to my dad and the ministry or you weren't. And she picked up the slack for those who weren't. Dad was growing into his role of leadership, and his biggest ally and supporter was my mom, which gave him courage and strength to keep reaching further as the time went by. She very often was the bad guy, the one who told you like it is, called your attention to something, required faithfulness, dependability, reliability, because that's what she gave to the calling. She tended to be demanding at times and called you out, but I believe she did all those things so that my dad didn't have to. She was his protector, his greatest asset in the ministry. She started many programs in our church, planned and executed every activity, taught Sunday school, worked in the bus ministry, organized the young people, and a lot of times organized the men. But she required participation from everyone. She had a yearning to see people come to church. It was the utmost importance to her. She was the first one for visitation on Saturdays. She ran her own bus route for many years. Two of my sisters-in-law are actually fruit that came to church via the bus ministry during the time she was active. Little did she know they would become her daughters-in-law. And she was always like, She directed every Christmas play, organized the kids with poems and songs, planned every vacation Bible school activity. If something came out of the pastor's mouth, she was executing it the very next day. In the last few years, we've come across so many spiral notebooks where she would write all her notes, all her planning of different events, lists and lists of hermanas jóvenes, varones. In other words, all the targets she would be asking to help or participate. Nobody was off the hook or could escape her. She was there to complement my dad's ministry, and she did that in every way, shape, or form that she could. In the midst of it all, she became a mom to 5 kids. Her precious, precious first one was born in Alice a year after their marriage, who she endearingly called Lindo until he got married. And then she had to stop that. 4 years later came Becky, after which they came back to San Antonio, started working at a small mission, which later became our church, Puerto La Hermosa. During the first year of the organization of the church came Ana. How she managed to fully be invested in building and supporting a new church and dealing with 3 little ones is beyond me. 2 years later came number 4, Josue, and only 1 year later came the baby, Calepito, which when he became pastor, it was a very long dissertation with my mom. You cannot call me Calepito at church anymore. It was very hard for her. He said, Calepito. I can remember that we lived in a house that was next door to our church. There were always people in our house. She never stopped either doing something at church or feeding us, plus the extras, ensuring all her home duties were done, looking after 5 kids. There was always something going on. In the midst of it all, in support of my dad's vision that the church facilities needed to expand, she managed to pack up the house, all 5 kids, 2 of them still babies, moved to the back rooms of the church while she saw the men of the church knock her house down. I can remember living in the back rooms of the church and taking a bath in the back by the baptistry. How she bathed all 5 of us back there, I don't know. It was probably inside the baptistry. She figured out how to organize us in all the little Sunday school rooms that were back there. She got us all dressed, ready, and was sitting at the piano in time. I'll never know how she did all that. Speaking about the piano, she was a pianist from day one until she couldn't anymore. That being said, she had 5 kids, terrible PK kids, who were on their own during the church services. Dad was up front leading, Mom was at the piano. 5 kids were ruling the benches. There were so many times she would come down from the piano and separate each one of us to sit with a different hermana from the church. And then she would give us that look when she went back to the piano. We were terrors after church, running over everyone in our path as we riled up all the church kids to play it after church. We ran over all the adults. Anyway, let me move on. I'm going to skip that whole thing. I'm going to skip, I can remember some Wednesday nights that my dad would get tied up. I would be late in coming to pick us up to get to church. My mom was not one that was going to sit around and wait. She had just as much urgency to get there. She had to be ready at the piano along with overseeing other things. I can remember that she would load us all up. You take the Bible, you take the books, you take the diaper bag, you take my purse. And we would start walking down the street, and sometimes we would make it all the way to Division Street. Mom crossing a 4-lane major road with 3 small kids, a toddler, and a baby. What an example of dedication, commitment, and faithfulness. That's why she expected it from others. My mom loved parties. She was always planning sometimes. Sometimes it was just because. I remember many holiness parties at our house. She would make them play the craziest games. We would even have holiness from other churches come. We have so many awesome memories that happened in our backyard. My mom always had a concern for people. We could constantly hear her on the phone calling people that hadn't come to church or checking in on them if they were sick. She would prepare food to take to people. If you hadn't shown up at church in a few weeks, you already knew she was going to come right to you and ask where you've been. Always giving a guilt trip, but always with the best of intentions. Many who grew up in our church are quick to point out my mom's strong characteristics. I know it's been very hard for y'all to come and console us because you're like, oh, your mother was. There was nothing phony about her. You got Mom 100% of the time. You were never asked, you were voluntold. She was quick to point out when you weren't right. She was quick to call you out when she saw something unacceptable. You knew exactly where she stood at all times. My mom hosted countless of people in our home. For many years, there wasn't a Sunday when people weren't in our house having lunch or dinner. We knew as soon as we got home from evening service, we were going to have to be in the kitchen helping Mom or entertaining visitors. She always told everyone, don't worry, I have 2 dishwashers. I don't know how she made food multiply. About 20 people could eat out of 1 can of tuna. Looking back, God always had her back. It was about 6 years ago when Anna first heard of the diagnosis of dementia during one of Mom's doctor's appointments. She forwarded that diagnosis to all of us. We brushed it off. Mom is Mom. Yes, she's starting to act a little different, but she's getting older. She's tired. Many things have started to change in my mom's day-to-day behaviors and manners, and we tried our best to address them and to help my dad through it as well. Time passed and things didn't get better. We became more worried. My brothers installed cameras in the house so that we could at least check on her throughout the day as my dad ran around. She was slower, more fragile. At the end of 2017, dementia had truly arrived at our doorstep. It crept up on us slowly while we weren't looking. Everything changed. As of January 2018, our family as a whole made the decision that our care for our parents would become a priority and a shared responsibility. My mom would not be able to stay at home alone any longer. We came up with a plan that we have faithfully followed until this day. We would each have an assigned day to be with Mom and Dad to ensure they had dinner and had someone there with them until Mom was put to bed. As the years went by, it got more and more difficult. Our mom went through so many stages of this horrible illness. Slowly, her mind faded away, and it was hard at times because she still was that strong-willed person inside. And even though she wasn't making sense or wasn't understanding, she always was still defiant and insisting that we were the crazy ones. We would adjust to the set of behaviors and thought we figured it out, how to handle them. Then she would just transition to a new adventure. And it was always, if it wasn't one thing, it was another. Time continued to pass. Then she knew none of our names. She knew we were her people, but had no idea how or who we were. She would call Jacob and Dana boy and girl, the boy, the girl, the twins. You know, she knew we were her people, but she thought her name was Mom because we called her Mom, 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 Mom. But she didn't know she was our mom. She would ask me, who's your mother? Mom, you're my mom. I don't think so. She knew we were her people. She started calling things by a different name, so we had to figure out what she was talking about. I think she thought we were trying to kill her every night when we wanted to give her her pills. It was very dramatic. With each transition she took, we were all there to be a part of it. There was never a time when we had to tell each other what Mom was doing or how she was acting or what she meant by certain things. We were all on the same page all the time. We were there, and we shared the load. Approximately 2 years ago, my mom suffered a stroke which progressed the dementia. She began to speak things that didn't make sense at all. So it was always a guessing game as to what she wanted or needed. I know this caused so much frustration for her that she would just break down. It was so hard to see her cry. I've always believed that she knew that she couldn't tell us what she needed, and the look in her eyes was always so telling of her own acknowledgement that she knew she couldn't. Her body was starting to become weaker and more frail. Her brain was declining. Her care was more important than ever. And we would not just let anyone take care of her. I want to take a moment right now to recognize the person who has been my mom's principal caretaker since March 2018. Tony, stand up. God could not have given us a more appropriate person, gracias, Tony, to care for my mom We came to her and asked her to literally leave a job she had to come and take care of my mom. We knew that Mom and Dad would be in great hands with Tony. For the last 3 years, she has been my mom's faithful companion. Mom could have never received better care than she did from Tony. It wasn't easy because my mom had a serious love-hate relationship with her. But thank the Lord that Tony always realized it was the dementia talking and acting out. Our family does not have the appropriate words to express how thankful we are to her and for the way she cared for my mom day in and day out. We never had a worry when Tony was there. Last year came the biggest challenge of all, COVID. My dad came down with COVID, and we were so scared that my mom would also contract COVID. There was no way to get her tested. They wouldn't test her. We couldn't take her anywhere. Was Tony going to want to continue staying at the house with Mom and risk getting exposed to COVID? She never wavered for 1 second. She was there for both my mom and my dad. There are no words to fully express our gratitude. It came time that my dad had to be taken to the hospital. What were we going to do with Mom? Both Anna and I had come down with COVID on that exact same week, so we couldn't be with Mom. How was Mom going to react to Dad not being in the house? It was really a scary time. And who stepped in? Tony did. She cared for my mom and stayed with my parents overnights since last November and has done so until last Friday when Mom didn't need her anymore. God showed his grace and love to my mom during this time and kept her safe. She never showed a single symptom of being exposed to COVID, and we were beyond grateful. Tony also never contracted COVID, which shows God's favor and reward on her for her selflessness she demonstrated in caring for our mom. There have been so many experiences over the last 3 years that we could write a book about it, both about what my mom has been through, what we have been through as a family, but also how God has shown his mercy. It has been the greatest live example to us that a life dedicated to God is never in vain. God takes care of his own. My mom took a turn towards the final stages of dementia earlier this year, back in March. The last time anybody saw her was at Nathan's wedding, and we were so thankful that we got her dressed, and I don't care if we have to hold her up, but she made it. We saw her weaker. She suffered another mini stroke, which left her speechless and without movement in her right arm and leg. It was very difficult to move her, but she was still feisty, and she would demonstrate it. But she could no longer communicate with us other than her looks and her hand slamming. As we've gone through these past 3 years, our heart and minds take us back to so many life lessons we've learned from her. It was always so heart-wrenching to see my mom in the condition she was in, because all we ever knew her to be was strong. Through highs and lows, strong. There was never any other thought that Mom would finish her life other than strong. Yet God allowed her to suffer the last 3 years, maybe to show us as a family something. Maybe it was not about Mom, but it was about us. We learned to fall in love with Mom. We came to want to take care of her. We came to realize that just as Mom has been an example to many, maybe it was our turn to be an example to others in the way we honored her and cared for her. Through all the crazy times, hard times, and good times over the last 3 years, one thing we could say with certainty: Mom truly knew she was loved. We made sure she felt it and saw it. 3 weeks ago is when we saw the final turn in her condition. It was hard to see. We were very selfishly praying to God to have mercy and reward her many years of dedication and allow her to go through what was going to be a very difficult few days. I'm almost done, I promise. Over the last 2 weeks, our family was there while supporting my dad. We were constantly around her bed, ensuring her of our love and gratitude. She wasn't necessarily responding to us anymore, but we knew she was hearing us. We expressed how excited we were for what she was about to see and experience. It was my 2 sisters-in-law who became the most worried while sitting with her and called attention to her change in breathing. It was a scary and stressful hour. We sang to Mom for a good while. We prayed with her. And after deeply struggling for the last 7 to 8 days, seeing her motionless and at times hearing her moan from pain, and while we continued to surround her bed and speak to her, she began to hear a voice calling her name, a glorious voice from heaven. I can't even begin to imagine what that experience was like for her. At approximately 11:45 last Friday, she all of a sudden adjusted her shoulders, adjusted her head, closed her mouth, and let out a soft breath. And we literally watched as she left her weak and frail body to be in the presence of her Lord and Savior, who she loved and devoted her life to since the age of 11. We, all of us who were there, will never forget what we saw and the experience we had. I want to thank my sisters-in-law who loved and cared for my mom as if she was their own mother. Every week they were there in support of my brothers, caring for my mom and dad faithfully and with so much love. All the grandkids who were always there with Grandma. She loved you so much, and I know you miss her terribly. She loved her grandkids. To my siblings, we were blessed. We shared our mom with so many people. Our mom was an example and mentor to so many. She took the best care of us as she could and ensured that we always knew that God was first and most important in our lives. Throughout the last 3 years, she became even more special to us, and we each became even closer and more endearing with her. It was so hard at times to deal with her in the state she was in. At times, it just felt surreal. This just can't be happening. She left a legacy that deserves honor and praise, and our dedication to continue it for the sake of her name and memory. As we all became adults and made our own life, we were better able to appreciate all the sacrifices she made to ensure our well-being while leading a very busy life in her ministry. We will always be proud to call her Mom. To my dad, there are no words to fully console your heart at this time. Your love for her was always evident. You have been a beautiful example of how to truly love your wife until death do you part. We know the last 3 to 4 years have been challenging as you tried to care for Mom, which tied you up from doing so many other things you had planned. But you never wavered from that responsibility and have shown us what true love is. Even when Mom couldn't really acknowledge your loving gestures, it didn't stop you from doing them. Thank you for being the best husband Mom could have ever had. God truly gave her the desire of her heart when she married you. It will take us all time to get out of the habit of going straight into the house to look for Mom, to see how she is, where she is, how does she look today, what kind of day has she had, what kind of day are we going to have, trying to deal with her. It's been all about Mom for a long time. Our life has a big gaping hole in it. It has been the honor of our life to have cared for my mom, and in doing so, ensuring to protect her legacy. It's hard to describe the bond we created and the love and respect that came from our experience with dementia. We now have a more clear and empathetic view, and it will help us as we deal with other families that go through the same thing. Today, heaven is a sweeter and more real place to us. We can't wait to get there to see her again. For now, we will honor her memory in the way we live, and the way we continue to care for our dad and continue to be there for each other and for others, just the way she always was. Thank you.